Hey, what up? This is Zach Guilford from Midnight Mass, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Pop Culture Pastor.
Pop Culture Pastor.
All right, Cody. Last night in our little neck of the woods, we had a microburst.
I have seen like 15 different versions of what we had.
A lot of people said it had to have been a tornado. No. It was not a tornado. It was straight line winds for a good 60 seconds.
And like straight line winds are damaging. That can level just as much as a tornado did or can. And so.
Yeah. Why is it a microburst? Seems like it should be a macro burst.
It's a small community. If it was Kansas City, then it might go up to a macro.
So it's all about the setting, not about the front that passes through with the burst.
Probably is the way you said it, but I'm going with, we're pretty micro on the grand scheme of things. As long as it's not a meso burst.
I don't even know what that means. That's an old one? Is that what that means?
No.
What does it mean? What's that prefix mean?
So like there's the micro, the meso, and the macro.
Okay, so meso is in the middle?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that would be boring.
It's
just a regular old burst.
Yeah.
It's not a micro or a macro. This whole conversation, all I've been thinking of are micro machines and how much I loved them.
Bring them back.
I loved micro machines, man. Those were so cool.
Although I do remember a parent or two stepping on the micro cars and that not being a pleasant experience.
David, I told you not to leave these out. Mom, you broke my Batmobile. It's got the sharp Batmobile. It's got the sharp. Anyways, hello. This is Pop Culture Pastor. Welcome. I'm Dave. Cody's here.
I am.
We got an interesting pod this week, I think, Cody, because pretty much everything we're going to talk about is based on kind of a reaction of something that happened in the news. There was a lot of news.
All the news.
A lot of randomness, but a lot of like really pointed things. And so our main subject kind of fell out of like what I was looking at in news stuff.
And it has nothing to do with the Home Alone 2 star getting arrested?
I was like, who? Home Alone 2? And then it dawned on me. I was like, oh, this is a Trump thing. No, there is nothing in this world I care less about than politics.
Thank you.
I mean, I just don't care. It's really hard for me during election years because everybody starts caring a lot. I know y'all are caring so much. And I'm just over here like, I just don't care. They're all the same to me.
Tomato, potato.
None of the platforms match like me issue for issue anyways. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Create your own. That's what I do.
And then like every time someone says lesser of two evils, a little part of me dies. I'm just like, oh, that's terrible. Why should that be what we look for in leaders? This is awful.
Yeah.
Anyways, he got arrested. I don't want to talk about him. I don't care.
So what's up?
Oh, okay. We just want to get into the news?
All the news.
Tori Spelling has a ulcer in her left eye.
What?
Yeah.
You can get that?
Oh, yeah. That's a thing. Tori Spelling recently shared a health update. This is according to Yahoo. She was spotted with a bejeweled eye patch. Yeah, for real.
That sounds like the Tori Spelling I know.
Why does she look the same age as her daughter, by the way? This is like I'm looking at a picture of Tori Spelling with someone else, and she's wearing her jaunty eye patch. And anyways, she's only 49. I thought she was older than that.
You might think that because she was in an episode of The Love Boat.
Was she really?
And also an episode or two of Saved by the Bell, but I digress.
You brought up the Love Boat, so here's the obligatory The Love Boat, exciting and new.
There was a lot of people that like had guest appearances or like kind of debuted in Love Boat as a no name.
Dude, we should totally go back and watch episodes of The Love Boat and talk
No, thank you. Although I did see a TikTok that had like a bunch of celebrities that we would call celebrities now that were on the Love Boat, including a young Courtney Cox.
Oh,
Arquette.
I bet that show is bonkers now. I bet if like some teenager watched the Love Boat, they would be like, what is this?
Why is David Hasselhoff not saving lives on the Love Boat?
Oh, the Love Boat. Nobody liked it back then. I don't know how that was a thing. Anyways.
A thing that kept going.
We were talking about Tori Spelling and how she has an ulcer in her left eye. Get this. She says, quote, "It's my fault. I did this to myself." She was talking to co-host and former co-star Jenny Garth. So she
90210 fame.
So the podcast they do is 90210 OMG.
Oh, you slay me, ladies.
I mean, I would make fun of this, but they have like, approximately 100,000 times more listeners than we do. So
they might have a new one after this pod.
Okay. So she's got an ulcer in her left eye. You ready for how this happened?
I'm ready.
She did not take her contacts out for 20 days. She slept with her contacts in.
Tori, you loose cannon.
I don't understand. I never got people like this. Like, if you've ever worn contacts and you've accidentally fell asleep with them in, that feeling when you wake up where they're like dry and melded to your eyeballs is the worst feeling. Like, I try to explain this for someone who's never worn contacts.
I've never worn contacts.
When they're on your eyes, they're set in a way, but they can move around so they don't feel constrictive, right? Like, but when you fall asleep, your eyes roll back in your head and they're away from your tear ducts, right? And so your contacts get all dry on your eyeball and they just basically become a part of your eyeball at that point until you can wet them down enough with your tears. And trust me, there are tears, lots of tears. It's just the worst. It's horrible. How can people do this? You savages?
Again, I've never worn contacts, so I wouldn't know.
She says it's not healthy. Don't do that. Well, yeah.
So usually like ulcers are like in your stomach and it's because you worry and stress too much and maybe have some acid reflux or something. But
according to medical professionals, corneal ulcers are most commonly caused by an infection with bacteria, viruses, fungi. This is how Last of Us starts. Or a parasite. Symptoms include blurry or hazy vision, bloodshot eyes, itching, sensitivity to light, and painful watery eyes. And I guess she's okay.
Well, she can at least pretend to be a pirate for a little while.
She says, thanks to all the well wishes and concerns. And our long national nightmare is finally over. She's healing and getting better. Don't worry, everybody. Tori Spelling's fine.
That was the thing that kept me up last night the most.
I was just lying there in bed and I was just like, oh my gosh, we can't lose Tori. Not her. Not Tori Spelling. Why would you do this, God? Remember, God doesn't mind if you ball up your fist and hit him on the stomach as long as you let him hold you while you're doing it. That was a pastoral thing.
Is this from a TV show or a movie that I should be?
No, I heard a pastor say that once.
Were you the pastor?
No, I was not the pastor. No, it's just, he was trying to say that you can be angry with God sometimes, but
you could be angry.
Just remember
with God.
that he loves you. And
that was just a really weird visual. I don't know how I feel about it.
It was super allegorical. I mean, I can almost imagine that. Anyways, I don't know why you'd be that mad. I don't think I've ever been that mad. Well, that's not true. I won't say that. This kind of makes me mad. Our next news item.
Okay.
Dwayne Johnson is back in the news.
Who?
The Rock.
I have blocked him out.
Oh, there's going to be all The Rock slander on this pod.
Again? Well, how many times must you keep coming back, man?
So he apparently was in Oahu, Hawaii.
Okay.
Where he's probably recovering from his failed changing of the hierarchy of the DCEU.
So I was really disappointed with my ex-best friend, Dwayne, Saturday and Sunday because he did not show up to WrestleMania.
Was he supposed to?
For like the past 3+ years, he's been in talks with WWE to come back and wrestle, especially now that his cousin Roman Reigns has the belt and has had the belt for a long time. So it would have been an epic, like, especially if he would have came back after Roman beat Cody Rhodes and would have been like, you, me, Puerto Rico, it's going down for real. Because the next like pay-per-view is going to be at Puerto Rico.
That's what wrestling used to be really good at.
Yeah.
Like the really big match and it ends with a new challenger, right?
And there was no challenge.
I want you at Road Wild in Sturgis in 6 weeks. Only on pay-per-view, $59.99. Pick kids, big sure and ask your parents. Everything used to be pay-per-view, man.
Thank goodness it's not that way anymore.
Yeah. Nope. So it didn't happen because Dwayne, he's too busy. He's got listen. The hierarchy of live action Disney remakes is about to change, apparently.
Again?
Yeah. He says, deeply humbled to announce we're bringing the beautiful story of Moana to the live action big screen.
Okay.
I don't understand why they're doing this with all the live action remakes.
Cash grab.
Are any of them good? Would you say any of them have been good?
I haven't watched any of them on purpose.
Right. Exactly. What, people listening, are any of them good? I mean, I saw the Jungle Book. I thought it was okay, but it pretty much sticks to the source material. And it seems cartoonish anyways, because you got CGI animals.
All the CGI.
That can talk. And I'm just like, okay, how is this all that different?
So I won't slander Dwayne's name here on this one. Because he's part of the original cartoon animated movie, and so I'm good. He can be the live action.
I bet
Maui.
Disney's not going to race switch this one.
No,
no,
they won't.
No, Disney was like, well, no, Disney. I did see someone with a clever tweet in regards to this that said that the 4 actresses they were hoping for Moana, and it was like Helen Mirren and 3 other pasty actresses. And he said, I only do this because, as you know, Disney representation's important. He's like, I don't like race switching at roles, but representation is important. It was a funny tweet because Disney, not because I think they should. Like, I think it's silly. Just leave the characters the way they were. And then this one, where the characters are so very it matters that they are from where they're from.
This one is very Pacific Islander.
Yeah. So that's what made the tweet funny, because it was a joke. I'm sure people got upset about it, though. Which, we're going to talk about that later a little bit.
I'm upset for all the people.
So, they're making a Moana live action, and that's the thing, I guess. This was an interesting news story that popped up this week, and I'm still not sure why. But this is straight from Yahoo. I'll just read you their first paragraph here on Yahoo Entertainment. After years of internet speculation, Dana Carvey confirmed the viral rumor that he observed a moment of silence for the September 11th attacks while dressed up as a humanoid turtle on the Master of Disguise set. Are you familiar with the Master of Disguise starring Dana Carvey?
No, I'm familiar with the very scene of him being dressed as a turtle, because he's like, am I not turtly enough for the turtle club? Turtle.
He looks very strange. And it's a weird thing to be thinking of. Well, first of all, why was this a viral rumor? Like, why is this something that's intriguing?
This is the most ridiculously sad / amazing fact I think I've learned all year.
Go ahead.
So this movie, I knew Dana from SNL reruns, and hilarious guy, and it comes out after Mike Myers has had a lot of success with the Austin Powers flicks. And so, like, this was kind of like his attempt to get up there and one up Mikey, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Like, there's some memorable scenes in it, but like nothing like, oh my goodness, this movie was a classic.
Yeah, it's sort of weird because I think back then, I don't think you would have had many arguments if you said Dana Carvey was the more talented one of him and Mike Myers. Like, Mike Myers is a funny dude and clearly a comedic, a guy that's got some comedic genius in him. But Dana Carvey was a big deal.
The big cheese.
Yeah, and he's like, he kind of plays Wayne's straight man as Garth in Wayne's World. And that's kind of that would probably be his biggest movie. I'm guessing, with him and Mike Myers in Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2. But yeah, this is just weird, and like this outfit he's in, I'm trying to imagine this. Apparently, he talked about it on David Spade's podcast. He was on there with him, and he couldn't get the prosthetics and stuff off. So they're sitting there, and he's dressed as Turtle Man with his bald head, and he said, "I'm holding the hands and I'm lowering my head and praying." And I just thought at that moment, this is very strange. And yeah, it is. It's kind of ridiculous, isn't it, to think of that? But it also speaks to like kind of the way 9/11 just happened in our consciousness. I mean, everyone's seen the video of President George W. Bush, but he's reading children's stories to like a kindergarten class when he gets the word. Mm-hmm. And everyone's seen that video, I think. And so it just kind of speaks to just how, I don't know. There's something when that sort of thing happens, there's something just surreal about it all anyways.
Oh yeah. And so I imagine what kind of spurred some of the rumor and speculation, besides like people that worked on the film, is just if you were someone that was old enough to remember the film and realize, oh, they probably would have been filming during September 11th.
Yeah.
Like, what ridiculous costume would he be in? And then, oh, snap. It's when he was trying to be turtly enough for the Turtle Club.
So apparently they were just starting to film that movie. And he said it was kind of hard, but they reframed it as, hey, we're trying to make a funny movie, and this humor will probably be needed. And so, yeah, they had to reframe it. And
they did not have a lot of humor in this movie.
Now, whether they were successful or not, that's a story for another time. But they tried, Cody.
They did.
They tried. The next story, and the last one I want to talk about here in the news segment, this is kind of a big deal. And I don't know, there's been rumors about this apparently. But it is once again being reported that a Harry Potter series is in the works at HBO Max.
Eek!
It looks like it's a television series, and they're basically readapting the books, the original books, and one book would be covered in each season.
So I honestly think that this is the medium that probably would work best for Harry Potter, because each book is a whole school year. Mm-hmm. I'm just amazed that not only are we revisiting it so quickly after the movies. I mean, the movies have been done for a long time, yes, but like not that long. And with all the controversy around JK, that surprised we're even touching it with a 10-foot pole, because like when the open world game dropped, there was so many people that like tweeted, I grew up with Harry Potter, but to know the hatred and vitriol that rests in that lady's heart, I will not be supporting her anymore with my money.
Yeah, we need to have an episode sometime where we talk about separating art from the artist, whether we can, whether you can, I can, because I do think that's an individual thing. I think that's subjective, like person to person, that might be different. But I think the problem is when we judge other people because, like, listen, I can sit here and say, well, Michael Jackson was a weird dude, and there's a lot of serious allegations around him. But I can also say his music was pretty good, and I enjoyed it. And like, look, a lot of musicians and artists maybe aren't, none of them are perfect people. I just don't know where you draw lines as far as like if they haven't committed a crime, right?
Yeah.
And J.K. Rowling kind of fits that category. It's like, well, she just has known for an opinion of something. And like, it's not worth bringing up. It's someone's opinion. Like, I don't care. That's more than anything else. I just don't care what J.K. Rowling thinks about hot button issues doesn't interrupt my day,
Yeah. I get those that say that, her following and her fandom, if people truly listen to her, then it can sway the minds and values of society. Although I think people are giving her a little too much clout.
Yeah. I liked listening to Motley Crue, but those dudes weren't, influencing what I think about the world. Right?
What?
Those guys come on. I'm not sitting here being like, well, I live my life to the creed of everything Vince Neil thinks. Whatever Vince Neil believes, I'm on board with because I really love Motley Crue. Like, no, of course not. Those dudes were out there.
Vince has had too many plastic surgeries. Yeah. Cosmetic work, cut it out, Vince.
I'm not on board with their behavior, but you start playing Home Sweet Home on that piano. And I might just start, swaying back and forth and singing. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, That's probably a discussion for another day, but that will come up if this is a thing that happens with the Harry Potter project. I assume that most Harry Potter fans would be excited about this, especially the adapting one book a year for each season.
So I think that those that can separate the art from the artist and their beliefs on culture and society are in love with this.
Yeah.
Because this would be the perfect adaptation style, and you're not confined to 2 hours or 2.5 hours. HBO series episodes usually are not short. And so if you have 6 or more, then you're going to have enough time to tell a good story and flesh out even some of those side characters and an HBO budget, assuming they're not being cheap. It'll make it look really nice.
Yeah, it seems like they could do what they did with Game of Thrones, which, the problem with Game of Thrones, for however many seasons, Game of Thrones was the biggest thing on the planet. And then when they ran out of written material, that's when things started to fall apart. So they've got all the written material. They've got it all. And Rowling can produce. She can be an executive producer. She can help them out. And then they can flesh out the stories better. It seems like it's a win-win. It seems like this would be bigger than Game of Thrones.
So I did see a funny tweet, a funny tweet or a funny Twitter response about this. And it was from Mina Kimes, who is a sports person. And she talks about it's all fun and games until the Weasleys have children together. Because that's what Game of Thrones was.
Yeah. Are they going to HBO this up? Are we going to have just, random nudity in this?
I hope not.
Surely not. It's Harry Potter. They know that kids will want to see this. It's interesting to think about the casting. So they would probably find, some kids to be the main, characters in the cast. But then it's really interesting to start thinking about, who Pedro Pascal would be, which is what I'm concerned about.
Is he going to be Snape?
Oh, that'd be cool, huh? Yeah, there's some really cool characters that they could really do some interesting casting with. And I'm not even a big Harry Potter person, but yeah, Snape would be cool. Dumbledore.
Yeah.
Brian Cox as Dumbledore. That'd be kind of cool.
He feels so grumpy.
That's right. He carries gravitas, my man. Sir Anthony Hopkins as Dumbledore. Is that too much? Too much.
Yeah.
I don't know. It'd be fun. It'd be fun to see them.
Russell Crowe as Hagrid.
Russell Crowe would make a great Hagrid. That dude's funnier than people think. I think Thor Love and Thunder proved that. He was like the best part of Thor Love and Thunder.
In random news before we move on from the news.
Yes, yeah.
James Gunn did thank Taika for getting Thor out of the way so they can make a Guardians 3.
That's right. So it seems like every week there's these interesting little tidbits about MCU Phase 4 where we hear so clearly what Phase 4 has taught us is that they are constantly writing the story of a lot of these movies up until the final week sometimes. So James Gunn comes out this past week and he says that basically Taika Waititi and Thor Love and Thunder bit the bullet and because he was not told that Endgame was going to end with Thor with the Guardians. And so he's already written part 3. And of course he gets kind of booted off the project for a while. And then it was already in development way back then. He's already written that and Thor was not in that because he had no idea. And he's like, what am I going to do with this? He had no clue. And I think it's interesting that he dropped it now. I thought that was interesting. But he said that apparently Taika Waititi had to come up with a storyline there early because it does feel weird how quickly that all resolves. At the end of Endgame, and this is.
I was so ready for an Asgardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. This is a fair criticism of the MCU, but at this point, I think, because we've seen enough evidence to know that they clearly are going on the fly sometimes. And at the end of Endgame, man, I think everyone was under the impression we were going to get a Thor Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and instead, what we got was 10 minutes as. They unceremoniously kind of found a way to get them apart. Which, by the way, sets Thor Love and Thunder on such this weird path because it's so weird in that opening scene, that opening storyline where Thor's kind of a bigger idiot than Star-Lord, which just is what is happening? And that's because you got Taika writing these characters that James Gunn, listen, the comic books are the comic books. Can I tell you that the James Gunn Guardians are very much, in a lot of ways, his own creation? Mm-hmm. That was the MCU's just a little bit in that movie in particular. That movie looks like its director and its story writer in James Gunn. And so, yeah, that's one of the weirder parts of Thor Love and Thunder is that whole 10, 15 minute interlude at the beginning where Taika had to write the Guardians out of the story.
It worked for its purposes.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't bad. The tone it sets for the movie is just, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm done talking about Thor Love and Thunder, Cody.
We're going to keep bringing it up.
It's the worst MCU movie ever.
The best.
I think you meant the best. It's the best at dumb humor. All right. I just don't know what to think of Taika now. I'm scared of Taika. Apparently a Taika Star Wars movie is still a thing that might be happening. And I'm just oh no. What is that going to look like?
It's going to look like a masterpiece.
Cody's still very much on board the Taika Waititi train.
I've bought all the Taika Waititi stock.
Okay.
I bought it low. I'm like, oh, you guys are selling? Let me keep stockpiling some more stocks.
Taika's everyone's selling? Buy! What's going on? He's buying Taika Waititi stock.
Yes.
What is that? Is that a thing? There actually used to be a thing. So like in the early days of the internet, there was something called the Hollywood Stock Exchange that was very much like that. It was buying like actors and directors, just like stocks. And you could buy like younger people, like younger actors and directors if you thought they were going to blow up. Like this was a real thing. It was kind of fun.
If only it was still a real thing.
I know.
Cody would be filthy, stinking rich.
Who else remembers Hollywood Stock Exchange? Let me know, because that was a favorite of mine in the early days.
/ you and Dave will have to do an episode segment without me, because I know nothing.
I'm still holding a lot of Selma Blair stock, that I thought was really going to be something.
You should cash out.
And Sarah Michelle Gellar, that stock. Yeah, it didn't Scooby-Doo happen. Anyways, Hollywood Stock Exchange was fun. All right. We're going to take a break. When we come back, the main subject, which we will tell you when we come back. All right, welcome back. Sometimes I don't know where, but like I'm a hairy dude, and sometimes a hair gets in my mouth, and like right as I was going to hit record, I was like, and
it's very gross sounding.
There's kind of a little bit of panic, like this could choke me. No,
then I'm having to carry the whole show by myself.
Yeah, Cody, it's a lot like in Major League when Bob Uecker passes out. I just think it's Major League 2. When Bob Uecker and he's got his color commentator, and Bob Uecker, they're in a losing streak, and he's drank too much and he passes out.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, fly ball, caught. It's one of the funnier little gags of Major League 2, which is inferior to Major League 1.
But you had to cash in on that.
But Bob Uecker, always hilarious.
Yes.
For those of my homies that remember Bob Uecker. Is Bob Uecker still alive? I haven't asked this for a while of a celebrity. I just became very afraid that Bob Uecker wasn't around anymore. Is he gone?
I feel like he's still alive.
I feel so bad. I don't know this. It's like ever since I stopped watching the Oscars, I don't know who died. And
he's still alive.
Bob Uecker's still alive. How old is Bob Uecker?
He is only, and I mean only, a ripe young 88.
Not bad. I thought he would have been older than that. Good for Bob. Bob's a great dude. He just seems like someone who just loves life. I like Bob Uecker. I like people who don't take life so seriously, who have a smile on their face. They've always got a joke. I like that. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. Okay. So the main subject of this pod kind of springboards from a news item. I told you there was a lot of news, a lot of weird stories dropped this week.
All the news.
Jennifer Aniston is on like some sort of promotional tour promoting Murder Mystery 2 on Netflix, co-starring Adam Sandler. Did you watch Murder Mystery 1?
I think that Leah and I started it and then we stopped.
Are these movies good?
Because I feel a lot of Adam Sandler's stuff, if it's a comedy here lately, it's more of, hey, I want to take a vacation with my rich pals at a nice area. Like his serious work lately has been, oh, this dude's trying to get an Oscar.
Right.
I see what you're doing.
Well, a lot of people said he should have got nominated for the movie he did about the gambling, sports gambling.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
Uncut Gems.
Yeah, that was the one.
But no, if he's doing a comedy anymore, I just assume he's trying to get his vacations paid for and hang out with some buddies. And you go, Adam.
I mean, like I've read somewhere that these are like some of the more watched movies on Netflix. These weird comedies that I don't watch. I was surprised to read it. I was like, oh, people are watching these.
Oh, I mean, there's definitely several funny moments within them, and it's not anything you have to be like, oh, I need to pay close attention so I can figure out who the killer is. No, it's a popcorn flick.
Sometimes you want Glass Onion, Cody. Sometimes you want Grown Ups too. That's just the way it is, right?
Yes.
Do we ever really want Grown Ups 2? Or, all right, I'll admit it. I've watched Grown Ups 1 and Grown Ups 2. And if there was a Grown Ups 3, I'd probably watch it. I'm not ashamed. So she's on this promotional tour for Murder Mystery 2 with Adam Sandler. And she gets asked about Friends because, of course, it's Jennifer Aniston. And she gets asked about kind of feeling out of step with the times. Because, like, one of the big topics around Friends in particular. So I've seen, like, you know, BuzzFeed and kind of these websites that are more geared for, they're more aimed at Generation Z and maybe like younger millennials. They really go after some of these old comedies. And so she's asked about Friends. And she says, quote, comedy has evolved. Movies have evolved. First of all, I would say comedies right now are not as good as they used to be. Now, maybe I'm just old. Maybe someone would disagree with me, but I feel like movies aren't as funny, the funny ones, and even TV shows. They're just not as funny. Am I wrong?
I mean, there's definitely exceptions to the rule because Ted Lasso makes me laugh several times, even in episodes that like have some serious layers to them. But I mean, like SNL, the funniest thing with SNL anymore is just the news desk, and that's because Michael Che and Colin Yost write jokes for each other to tell, and so like. Usually Michael Che will make Colin say something that's kind of racist. and then like Colin's reaction to him reading it out loud and you seeing Colin like fully process it in the moment. That's what makes it funny. But like the rest of it, it really depends on who the guest is.
Yeah, Ted Lasso, definitely an exception. And I don't know if my guess is because Ted Lasso is so genuine, it's so humanly genuine. Like there's no pretense that any of these humans are not broken.
It's human, and also they make a lot of references to other things. And so if you're in on the reference, then you're in on the joke.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if Ted Lasso appeals to a younger crowd or not.
That's a good question. I don't know either.
Because like everyone I see that talks about it is millennial and up.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're all that matters.
Thank you.
Just kidding. We do have a healthy Gen Z listening population to this pod. And if you are a member of Gen Z, welcome. We're glad you're here. And we love, let's mend some generational fences, shall we? By talking about generational rifts. So Jennifer Aniston was asked about Friends. She says, now it's a little tricky because you have to be very careful, which makes it really hard for comedians. Because the beauty of comedy is that we make fun of ourselves, make fun of life. Is Jen Aniston saying she's a comedian?
She is not that great. If she is saying that she is one.
So that's funny, first of all, the way she frames that. She goes on to say, there's a whole generation of people, kids, who are now going back to episodes of Friends and find them offensive. There were things that were never intentional and others, well, we should have thought it through. But I don't think there was a sensitivity like there is now. So she's making a claim to say like, well, it wasn't the context. Right? So like we talk about that a lot. We talk a lot about like, hey, you can't really judge things in the past by the context of now. That's not really fair. I mean, like, look, 20-year-old me said some things that were probably not great for the context of now. And me now would never say them. But 20-year-old me, the context was different. I didn't know, first of all. Plus, it wasn't like a an atmospheric, a societal thing, I don't want to just like intentionally offend somebody. But if you judged 20-year-old me by the context of now, I might be offensive. I don't know.
I'm offended.
I knew you would be. It's okay. The show's lack of diversity has been a topic in the past. Series co-creator Marta Kaufman expressed remorse about it last year, as she did in an interview. And yeah, so she just talked about it a little bit. She gets it out there. And basically what I want to talk about today, and I want to kind of save our Friends discussion for last, because Friends is like, that's the context that's brought up. I want to talk about other 90s sitcoms and the idea of, could we make those? Is there something about these shows that don't hold up? Are they funny? And so I asked you to think of a few of your favorites, and I'm gonna come with a couple of my favorites, a few of my favorites, and then we'll just talk about them.
So I have a thought about where Jen is wrong.
Okay,
but are we going to talk about that during the Friends time, or?
Yeah, I'll let you lead off with that when we get to Friends. Let's just
okay.
Let's save Friends for last, because I feel like it's the most hot buttony of them. And I have some pretty hard thoughts on Friends and Friends criticism.
I have some pretty logical thoughts on it.
Yeah. Because I still rewatch Friends as a matter of like, it's almost like nostalgia. I like to watch it before I go to bed. I'll watch an episode. But it doesn't hold up. But it doesn't quite hold up. But we'll discuss it in a little while.
Okay.
Why don't you start off? Tell me one of your 90s sitcoms you want to talk about.
Family Matters.
I just made an Urkel reference today. It's getting harder to do that, by the way.
It is.
Especially around young people. I said, did I do that? And everyone looked at me like, did you do what? Like, this is Urkel, never mind. TGIF.
Yes.
Does it hold up? Is it still funny?
Yeah, I would say it does.
Yeah.
I think that what Family Matters and a couple of the shows I'll mention, the reason it holds up besides, so like it not only tackled some heavy issues, because I can remember an issue or an episode where Eddie and Waldo get arrested or get chased by the police, and they really hadn't done anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were just black kids in the wrong spot. And
this is an interesting conjunction of like 90s culture joining with our culture now, because in LA, the beating of Rodney King really sparks a lot of that same conversation and protesting and rioting.
Yes.
The same way it's kind of around our, culture now.
And Carl, who is everyone's favorite TV dad.
Everyone loves Carl.
And now he's in the commercials. But he talks with the cop, and the cop's like, oh, it was an honest mistake. And like, no, wasn't a mistake. You were profiling, jabroni. But the humor holds up. The issue, I think, that if someone was to heavily critique, it is that you could say that Steve is being bullied, which they address that he's bullied.
Yes.
It's labeled accurately that he's bullied. And you could probably say that Carl could treat Steve better. But Steve Urkel kept coming over.
Yeah.
He just kept showing up.
Right. Like, we can all sit here and say, this is something like we would have been able to talk about much easier back in the 90s, which we'd be like, yeah, I mean, they're making fun of Urkel. That's probably not cool over time, but also Urkel's really obnoxious.
And he keeps coming over.
He just comes over unannounced all the time. Being obnoxious. Being a close talker, because you know he was a close talker.
Oh, yeah. And, like, I would love to do an episode of the podcast where we compare 90s shows, because there's several shows that are basically the same show, but it's slightly different. Because Full House is Family Matters, but Kimmy Gibbler doesn't take off.
Yeah.
And so I think that this holds up because we have seen Full House be revamped and redone. And if there is any issue really, like, there would probably be like sexual identity, lack of diversity in that arena.
Yeah. Well, we should have had DJ on this podcast.
Should have.
To bring us the African-American perspective on a show like Family Matters and the show that I'll talk about first, which is Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is another one of those. I was reading an article today on Mike.com where the author is basically saying, hey, as the charming ladies' man, Will Smith actually turns out to be pretty cringe. He catcalls, he harasses women throughout all 6 seasons. And he says it hasn't aged well in light of the Me Too movement. And so, you know, like...
It hasn't aged well in light of Will Smith slapping someone either.
Yeah, well, right. And I will say that as far as Fresh Prince goes, it hasn't aged well in that regard that they mentioned. I would agree with the catcalling because in the 80s when I was growing up, I grew up with a single mom who was young. It was not weird to be out in public for guys to like whistle at her, which you never hear that now. That's not a thing. Hey, baby, woo! You know, like that is not a thing. And like I'm here to tell you in the 80s, that was totally a thing. Like,
yeah,
it was so normal back then. And like, of course, now you can see like how problematic that is, but also some women liked it. They dug that attention. And so it wasn't immediately, it's not like back in the 80s that happened and women would be like insulted or disturbed about it. I'm not here to say that whether they should have been or not. Maybe they should have been. I don't know. I just know it's different. Back then, it wasn't a big deal. Now it is. And you don't hear it as much anymore. You don't see that happen.
Although I will say that Fresh Prince, like Family Matters, would have these hard-hitting issues that they would address social dilemmas. And I don't know if I finished my thought on Family Matters.
No,
but
keep going.
like,
Yeah.
They would have like a lesson at the end of each episode. I would say Fresh Prince did not have necessarily a lesson at the end of each episode. Sometimes it did, like when Will Smith's dad left him.
Oh man,
that one was tough,
dude. Don't talk about that. I'm not ready to cry in this pod. That episode.
But then there's episodes like, oh, everything worked out just fine. Life's great. And then you move on. So I definitely think that was a show that sometimes it just ends happy and that's good. And you don't need a moral to the story or a lesson to be taught. But some shows rely heavily upon it.
I will say, if you're a young person, that is a distinctly 90s thing, that the serious episode of the sitcom.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so different from now because nothing, you know, back then you had to wait for the time and the day of the week that the show was on. And so there was a lot more commercials for shows, right? You'd just be watching random things and see commercials for other shows while you were watching your other stuff. And all these, I used to make fun of these commercials all the time because they were all like the same. It was like, Friday, an episode of Family Matters your family can't afford to miss. You know, like it was always that. It's like, does Eddie get blasted by the law? You know, like police officers out of control. And you know, it was just, that was a thing.
It was.
It was at least once a season. There would be an episode of, Fresh Prince, Family Matters. And it was always those kind of shows, like with the family unit. Because like Friends wouldn't do this.
Friends did
wouldn't
not
do
do this.
It was more of these shows that had like a younger following, I'd say. So Family Matters, the TGIF shows, Family Matters, Full House. What was is there one I'm not thinking of?
Step by step.
Step by Step. The one with the dude from Dallas, Patrick
Yes.
Duffy and Suzanne Summers. Yeah. All of these were based on like families, and as such, they had a younger following. And they were good for at least one episode a year. It's like an episode of Step by Step you family can't afford to miss. On this episode, Patrick Duffy does drugs. I did it because of you, Dad. It was always these crazy plot lines that always felt like kind of shoehorned in. You're like, no, I just saw Patrick Duffy last episode. He was fine. What happened?
Like
Now he's
AC
hooked on meth.
Slater taught me, there's no hope with dope.
The Saved by the Bell sleeping pills episode is one of the more well-known ones of those. And so, the episode is manic. It's just like a manic episode. And they always feel dropped in where you're like, how is Jesse Spano hooked on the sleeping pills just all of a sudden? Like there's no buildup. It's just here, like, bam.
Well,
Now she's so excited.
When your music career is taking off and you got to study for the SATs, you got to take all the caffeine pills.
So that was a thing especially in 90s sitcoms. That was fun.
And I feel ER in like serious shows like that would have like a super serious episode, even though all their episodes were serious.
Yeah, that was in the 80s. That was specifically a 90s thing, because it's not like in the 80s you'd be like, on this week's Dukes of Hazzards, Bo punches Luke, like brotherly fighting, moonshine addiction. No, that wasn't a thing in the 80s.
That wasn't.
It was really specifically a 90s thing, and the shows that had younger people watch them. We had all the commercials. Remember this is your brain. It was like an egg. She holds up an egg, and then she's like, this is your brain on drugs. And she cracks the eggs in the frying pan. Any questions? That was Rachel Lee Cook, I believe, who I've mentioned on another show I had a huge crush on. It got quiet.
I definitely remember the commercial. I can't tell you if that was Rachel Lee Cook or not.
I'm telling you, I'm pretty sure it was.
I'll take your word for it.
And it's just a little creepy that I remember that. Anyways, if you were to remake Family Matters today, how would you remake it? Could you remake it pretty much the same? Like, listen, we're starting off intentionally, I think. Family Matters, Fresh Prince. These are ones that would probably fit in, although Fresh Prince has some complaints because of the way Will is around girls.
Yeah. I don't know if you would have Carl be a cop.
Yeah, that's true. Carl's a cop. It just fit right in because he was a cop in Die Hard.
And he is frequently on the show fat shamed.
Oh, is he? Yeah, that wouldn't fly.
And so you'd have to change that, or you again have these learning episodes where there's a moral to the story that like quit body shaming Carl.
Serious question. Would they even cast an overweight actor now as the dad? I'm feeling like Mike and Molly's ratings weren't that great, y'all. Like, would they even do that now?
I think so.
Yeah.
This is us.
Well,
that's where I'm going to say they.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. That's the actress on This Is Us is a larger gal, and I can say that because I'm a larger guy.
And so I think that it's out there. Even that show that Eric Stone Street's on.
Yeah.
Modern Family. That's it.
I'll say this, for all our screaming about representation, the representation that's farthest off the averages of what actually exists out there is probably overweight people, because this country's got a lot of overweight people, and the percentage wise isn't that great as on, like, your TV shows.
Yeah.
Certainly not on shows like, Friends, but we'll get to that. Yeah. How would you remake Fresh Prince? Well, they did.
They did.
And it was serious.
I'm not here for it. So
I don't know if anybody was here for it. Let's talk about, do you want to talk about Saved by the Bell? Since we brought it up.
I wasn't going there.
You weren't going to go there?
No. Although they've remade it.
Saved by the Bell. Did they remake that?
Yeah, it's an NBC show as well.
Yeah, but they were older, right? It was their kids.
It's their kids, but it's Saved by the Bell.
Yeah. Yeah, they tried to do like a Cobra Kai thing with it.
Yeah.
To lesser success. Because they didn't learn the lesson of what Cobra Kai did, which is kind of making fun of themselves. Which Cobra Kai, I mean, as the show goes on, Cobra Kai gets less interesting because they're less making fun of themselves and more taking it seriously again. And then you get to the point where like nobody's into karate this much. Nobody.
I honestly don't think that they could do that with Saved by the Bell.
Like making fun of it?
Because Screech is dead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I forgot about Screech.
Which, oh my goodness. This show is so problematic. It is tremendous, and I love it.
Well, first things first, you have to ask the first question, which is, does it hold up? Is it funny? And like, how does something that wasn't funny to begin with hold up?
It was hilarious in its day, and it's hilarious now, but for completely different reasons.
Was it hilarious though?
It was.
Oh man, I don't know.
But now Funny or Die is making bank off of Zach Morris's trash.
Yeah.
And you send me one of those, I'm laughing throughout because it's like, yeah, we did let Zach get away with dressing up as an indigenous person. And then,
and why? Because he was attractive. That's why.
And like spraying oil all over everyone.
Saved by the Bell is an interesting look at our we'll let you get away with stuff if you're attractive rule that we don't talk about.
Yeah. Because like Zach is constantly doing things that objectifies the ladies. There's an episode that he falls in love with this lady at the mall, makes fun of this homeless dude at the mall, and come to find out the very attractive lady that he's into, her dad's the homeless gentleman.
Yeah.
And he does this horrible ruse to basically get with the very attractive homeless lady. And
it's seen it a million times,
yes.
y'all.
And so, I mean, there's a lot of problematic stuff with just Zach.
Yeah,
you
Zach,
don't even have to look at any other character, and Zach doesn't withstand.
Zach Morris is super cringy. Yeah. He's not Mark Paul Gosselaar, who you met at Last Planet Comic Con, who's the man.
He is.
But Zach Morris's character is super cringy.
But even on the show, he's played to be cringy during the time of it. That he's a rich, preppy kid who is very entitled, who like his biggest downfalls usually happen because he comes from a place of entitlement, and like Jesse's one-liners, if they're not geared towards Slater, they're geared towards Zach and his entitlement. Lisa calls him out. Kelly calls him out. Tori calls him out. Leah Remini's character calls him out. I mean,
Leah Remini was in that show. I forgot about that.
She's in the episode where they're at the summer resort on the beach.
Well, let's put a pin in that conversation because I want to end on that one after when we get into Friends. But we'll talk specifically about cringy characters, even in the context of back then. How would you remake Saved by the Bell? Well, they did.
They did, and it wasn't good.
Yeah. What you should have done was started over with new kids in today's classrooms. Make it about today. You could be funny. I think that's the part. Yeah. I think it's the part we struggle with. How do we make something today that's funny without hurting people's feelings?
Freaks and Geeks did it, although they hurt everyone's
Freaks
feelings.
And Geeks was old, and people's feelings got hurt. Okay, what's your next one? So
the show I was going to go with, A Different World.
A Different World, the Cosby spinoff.
Yeah. So it spent equal time in the 80s and 90s. If I'm going to list it in the 90s, so then I can use it. The show is great. I enjoyed it. Takes place at Hillman.
Like a traditionally black college is what it's supposed to be. Historically
black college or university, which it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's weird because Marissa Tomei's like in the first season and then she disappears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you don't see like any white people after that. Like Marissa Tomei disappeared and then like any white students from Hillman disappeared.
Well, the show becomes pretty much about Dwayne Wayne and Whitley, played by Jasmine Guy, who it's hard to undersell how big of a deal they were.
Oh, yeah.
Back then. Like Dwayne Wayne and Jasmine Guy's Whitley. I mean, they were, you thought they were going places. You thought they were going to be stars.
And literally, I think a small percentage, but a percentage nonetheless, of my fascination with Denzel is because of Whitley's fascination with Denzel.
Yeah.
Like she had a huge, framed photo of Denzel. And I remember one episode, she's the RA and her dormitory building catches on fire and she tries to run back in and she's like, Denzel! And is trying to save Denzel. But no, this show, again, there's usually a lesson at the end of each episode. And it deals with heavy topics. And it's a show that deals with representation. So I think it's one that was way ahead of its time in that regard.
Yeah.
The problematic piece is who was the showrunner.
Right.
A1 William Cosby. Yeah. And so where you have issues is with that. And also, I think if you remake it today, I think that you adult up the conversations that they're having. Because it's supposed to be following college students. And unless college students in the late 80s and 90s were just these very well-spoken, polite, rarely cursing.
Like you said, this is a spinoff of the Cosby Show.
And so there is an image that at this time Bill Cosby has.
Right. So what the Cosby Show does for the national consciousness around African Americans, for people who maybe don't live around African Americans, right? Mm-hmm. Is you get Dr. Huxtable, who doesn't speak like he's, from the inner city. He doesn't, they seem well-to-do, which, that might be something that doesn't hold up. I think most of the African Americans I knew back in the day liked the Cosby Show, but maybe today we wouldn't like it as much because maybe they're not representing, maybe they're dropping their culture because of where they live. I don't know. I don't know what the discussion would be, but it makes sense that show spins off into a different world where, you've got highly intelligent young people going to college, and they're not it's not like if you made a movie about college students today, it wouldn't look like that.
No.
They'd have all the problems, right?
Now, towards the end of A Different World, when Jada Pinkett Smith comes on the scene.
Yeah.
She has more of an edge. Her character does. Seems more rough, but at the same time, again, it's nothing too far out there.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of funny because Sinbad's on the show early on.
Right.
And Sinbad's humor did not line up with the Cosby Show model.
Oh, I love Sinbad, though. Big prayers for Sinbad, by the way.
Yes.
Who recently had a stroke. Man, I loved everything Sinbad was in, I was all on board for. I love me some Sinbad.
You need to watch the episode of him and Rob Thomas on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
It really.
It is bananas. And I love it.
It has been said by some people, my family and some friends, that I've modeled my entire comedy shtick off of Sinbad's character in First Kid. They're not wrong. They're not wrong. So yeah, the moral thing, by the way, in shows, that was kind of an offshoot of the 80s and into the 90s. That was a thing too.
Yeah.
Our cartoons, G.I. Joe. Remember the cartoon G.I. Joe had like the moment at the end. It was like,
Yo, Joe.
There was always some random moral thing. They're like, don't, randomly cross the street without checking the signals. And like, the more you know, and knowing's half the battle. There was always like a moral.
Yeah.
That was a thing. That was the thing we did. There was also a show that ended, and I can't remember what show it was, but it was literally, the show was like, and what we learned this week? Well, I learned that, literally shows ended like that.
Yeah. And like, I can think Different Strokes. Good Times would always end with something like really happy, that the family would be like, well, at least we got this, until the dad died. And then like that episode just ended really sad.
Yeah, no, I'm not here for that. The dad's still alive, by the way.
I
know that.
Chief's great.
Because we looked it up on the way to Comic-Con. I was like, wait a minute, is he still alive? He is. McDowell from Coming to America. Okay. Do you have another one you want to talk about, or do we want to?
One more.
Yeah, hit me
Let
with
me pull up my list. The one that I don't know if it ages well, although it has a moral at the end of each episode. Home Improvement.
Oh, wow. Now, probably if it doesn't age well, it's because liberals don't like Tim Allen.
Tim Allen. And I mean, on the show, his character is painted to be a male chauvinistic dude that like he's a meathead.
He learns a lesson every episode.
He does.
He's in the wrong every episode.
Every stinking episode, he is either having a conflict with his wife, his kids, or his coworker, and somehow the neighbor that you never get to see his face, Wilson, he always helps Tim, and Tim like misremembers it, but it's close enough that it's actually beneficial, even though his wife's like, "You're an idiot."
Wilson is like a living, breathing embodiment of the book of Proverbs.
Yes, he
like
is.
Cody's not lying. Every episode, Tim ends up out at his fence, and there's Wilson from the eyes up.
Yes,
and Wilson just drops some ridiculous wisdom on him every time, because Cody's right. That show probably would be problematic today, but there's some context there you're missing in that Tim is not painted to be a great dude.
No.
He's super uber male, and that's always getting him in trouble. He's blowing stuff up.
He's spending too much time working on the car.
Yeah. And that dude, it's obvious in that show, that dude hit the jackpot with his wife. Like he was shooting up, right?
He did. There was one episode where JTT was really upset with Tim because JTT was all about environmentalism, and Binford Tools was the #1 polluter in all of Michigan.
Come on, Binford?
And who sponsored Tool Time? Bin for Tools.
Tool time.
And so literally, like, they had an episode where Tim and his son were beefing, and Tim had to go out to the fence and realize, hey, it's good for my kid to actually be passionate about something. And even though I can't fully commit to the level that he is, and because this is helping pay for our house, I should be supportive.
I think you mean it was an episode of Home Improvement your family can't afford to miss.
Exactly.
Dude, the two older boys were like heartthrobs. They were like, so back in the day, this is going to be really weird, but go with me. There were these magazines devoted to like teen boys called like Tiger Beat. You remember Tiger Beat? And Jonathan Taylor Thomas and who is Zachary?
Yeah. What was
the one with the mullet.
Yeah.
He was in First Kid.
He was.
Those two boys were like the teen heartthrobs of the time. That's probably weird if you're a kid today that, yes, there were magazines back in the day devoted to fangirling. Basically, teen fangirling over like these teen heartthrobs.
Zachary Bryan.
Yeah, Zachary Bryan. Zachary Ty Bryan.
It is.
I knew he had three names.
Bryan. I never gave him the T where I would give Jonathan Taylor Thomas all the T's.
So I remember the youngest brother because years later he came out of the closet and went to KU for a little bit. And that was a big deal. Like people knew him in Lawrence.
Taryn Noah Smith.
Yeah, Taryn Noah Smith.
Everyone had three names.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he was someone who was like kind of in our consciousness there in Lawrence because he goes to KU for a bit. I don't think he lasted long. But I heard he was disagreeable. I heard he was hard to get along with, but that is just hearsay. I don't know. All apologies to Taryn if you're out there listening, which you probably aren't. Yeah, so that's a good segue. Like, I was curious to whether there were any other 90s shows that in today's context would be hard. So I looked up an article that listed some off. This article says Johnny Bravo.
Oh, Johnny Bravo couldn't be made today. I mean, literally, Johnny Bravo is like a buff Elvis dude that is constantly catcalling.
This describes it as toxic masculinity as entertainment.
Yes, and it was great. It was hilarious. And it would, like, sometimes on HBO Max, it was on there, and I would go back and watch episodes just to laugh. I mean, if you thought that this is the way men should act, you completely missed the point of every episode because he gets beat up. All the ladies beat him up, and he's constantly losing out on things. And so, like, that show, A, wouldn't get made today, but B, if you're watching it, you realize this dude's the worst, but it's funny.
Yeah, this Home Improvement is listed. They list a particular episode where Tim's son gets cast as Peter Pan in his school play. His son rehearses his part, which finds him simulating flight. And to Tim, who is watching unbeknownst to his son, the rehearsal looks excessively feminine to the point that Tim nearly has a heart attack, which sounds kind of funny. This article says that sort of gender essentialism can be left in the 90s. I don't even know what gender essentialism is. Can you?
I'm not even going to try to define that.
Okay. I'm going to get to this. We're driving towards something. Dawson's Creek is listed. Mostly because I would say it doesn't hold up because, it has teenagers saying teenagers would never say.
And so something that I think Home Improvement doesn't have a lot of, and I don't recall Dawson's Creek having a lot of, is just diversity. Like, they're very white neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And with Tim being in Detroit, Michigan, or a suburb of it, I feel that there would be more opportunities for diversity.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot that took place in Detroit. Yeah. Saved by the Bell is listed on here. Petty, silly, and void of any real substance for a show about kids.
How dare you?
The Ren and Stimpy show.
They're animals.
Somehow the adults in the room thought that a TV Y rating was appropriate for the Ren and Stimpy show.
That was never supposed to be TVY, my friend.
Yeah, well, we didn't think much about violence back then. No. Seinfeld, which we haven't talked a lot about. But I have a point to bring up about Seinfeld. Seinfeld was maybe the most popular sitcom of all time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is it still bigger than Friends? Or
in my books, it is.
I always liked Friends better, but I enjoyed Seinfeld, and I think Seinfeld was still bigger.
So between the two shows, I can rewatch episodes of Seinfeld. I really can't stand Friends.
This list's in living color.
Oh, yeah. I've been seeing some TikToks where, like, Jim Carrey stuff especially is kind of cringe. But then there's one with Damon Wayans where, like, he's a superhero, but the superhero is mentally/physically disabled.
Yeah, I remember that one. That's problematic.
Doesn't age well.
This says homophobic, transphobic, and misogynistic. Which I'm betting if you go back long enough, a lot of our entertainment, especially if it was supposed to be funny, was probably had a little bit of that. Tiny Toon Adventures?
The Tiny Toons?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, Bugs is constantly like flirting with Lola.
Tailspin?
You shut your mouth. You crossed the line there, writer of this article.
They said there's a couple episodes that rub people the wrong way. In an episode called Last Horizons, the show finds its star Baloo stumbling on a city beyond the last horizon, Panda Law. The episode features panda-inspired characters and a whole lot of terrible East Asian stereotypes.
You could still remake the show or still show all the episodes except for the ones that are not Asian friendly in their depictions.
Okay. So let's wrap this all up with Friends, because Friends was how we started. I think here's the big divisiveness, because I don't want to look, I could talk about whether Friends holds up as funny. I still laugh at Friends. Like I said, I still watch Friends, but it's not quite. I laughed harder at it back in the day. There are some parts that are cringy.
So I think Jen misreads the room.
You are listening to Pop Culture Pastor.
So if I was to go back to the early 80s, or even the mid 80s, and I asked Dave, how's Leave It to Beaver? You're probably telling me it's boring.
Yeah, I hated Leave It to Beaver. I thought it was incredibly boring.
And there's no action, there's no cars, there's no funny parts.
Yeah.
And so, I think that what we're seeing is just the way Gen Z is labeling this as, this is kind of boring. But it's like, there's this missing and there's this missing. And so,
but that's not what she's reacting to. Let's be fair. Gen Z says Friends is problematic.
You can say Friends is problematic, but if I grew up watching the A-Team and I'm watching an episode of Leave It Beaver, I'm like, well, where's the black people? Because B.A. Baracus is black.
And they're also drugging him against his will all the time to get him on airplanes.
Where is the fast cars? Where's this? Where's that? Yeah. And I would say it's problematic because it's lacking all these key things. I think that's part of the Gen Z criticism of it. I would also say that, literally everything has its own context. Rewatching episodes of The Office, there's an episode where Michael Scott's being ushered by security and he's like, have you ever worked with anyone famous? And the guy's like, I can't tell you. And he's like, oh, so no one? And then the guy's like, Nelly Furtado. And it's like, I know Nelly Furtado. No one that was born as a Gen Z person is going to know who Nelly Furtado is. So there's references for that time period that if you grew up in it, you lived through it, you get it. You're in on the joke. There's some of that with Friends. Not a lot, but some. And Friends just really wasn't like, I know it was much must-watch TV, but like once you've seen it play through once, I don't know if it holds up just because you already know how it ends.
It's one of those shows that definitely goes on too long. Yeah, every show had funny moments, but it's because of the actors' camaraderie, their chemistry together. Like they're just funny together, as evidenced, honestly, by none of them have really gone on to successful careers other than Jennifer Aniston. Maybe Courtney Cox has done some TV in the Scream movies after that. But honestly, that's about it. Like none of them really enjoy a lot of success. And part of it is they didn't have to. They were all just super filthy rich.
Oh, yeah.
By the end of this. You said Jen is out of a touch, and I would agree with that. Jen doesn't get Gen Z, clearly. But I also think it's fair to say Gen Z doesn't get us, Gen X, and the people that grew up with this show. And let me explain. Let's take a look at Home Improvement. Tim, Tool Time Tim. Let's take a look at another sitcom that we didn't talk about, Married with Children.
Al Bundy.
We were under no pretense that these were good people. The Friends, all 6 of the Friends are not good people. We knew that.
Yeah.
They're cringy a lot. And we knew that. It's not like we were unaware. We just didn't. I don't know. There's something that's different now where if someone's cringy or someone's human or ignorant, like that's the thing. It's like how many people are blatantly racist and how many people, give out microaggressions because they're just ignorant. They just don't know.
So I also have one other little critique. Okay. And that so I'll stick up for the Gen Zers because the thing is, the reason why Friends was one of the highest streamed shows over the past 5 years, and the reason why The Office was one of the highest streamed shows over the past 5 years, it's because Gen Z streamed all of it.
Yeah.
And so there's a chunk of Gen Z that actually likes these shows, but Steve Carell, who owes his career in large part to The Office success.
True.
He's said several times, don't remake this show. Don't reboot this show. This show was great for its time place, but it's highly offensive, and it's nothing that should be uplifted. People at that time were in on the joke that Michael Scott really wasn't the best of guys. He usually wasn't intentionally doing it, although there are episodes and points that he is.
Yeah, but isn't that it, though? Like, I kind of disagree with him saying that Michael Scott was highly offensive as a person. Michael Scott did things that were highly offensive, but you also saw that Michael Scott had an actual heart for people, that he actually cared about people when it came down to it. And that's real humanity. That there's real humanness there where Michael Scott's just not a very smart, worldly dude, and it gets him into trouble because he says too much. But like, we understood watching the show that we're not lifting up Michael Scott. Nobody was lifting him up and saying, what a classic human being. Like, no, he's awful. He's cringy. And it's funny. We could laugh at that. And I think that's like when I see this about Friends and stuff, it's like all of those characters are super like, George Carlin used to say the way you construct any joke is you just take one thing about real life and stretch it way out of proportion. Well, all those characters on Friends, those aren't real people. You can't find a Phoebe walking around. Like, no one actually acts like that. No one actually acts like Ross because they're blown way out of proportion, and that's what makes it funny. And I think we used to recognize that. And by the way, you also mentioned something you mentioned there that I think is accurate too, is the loudest people are often the ones we hear. And so I do think there's a good chunk of Gen Z that can enjoy those shows and do enjoy those shows. My daughter loves The Office. She also understands that they're super cringy, like that Michael Scott's not someone you want to emulate.
Yeah. And I do think that although in the 90s, the aughts, before, maybe even now, that we're aware that people really aren't like this. There is definitely a segment of the population that's like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be just like Rachel.
Yeah. At least they wanted her hair.
I want to be just like Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City. Yeah. I want to be just like this or just like that. Or, you know what? Tim the Toolman Taylor is the real embodiment of me on screen. And like, you get these sentiments. And
that's fair. There's a lot of dudes who are walking around who still probably are acting like Tim the Toolman Taylor. That's fair.
Which I would also say set men back quite a bit. But I think that it's okay to have conversations about characters. There's a lot of Adult Swim shows that like either early on or even throughout its run, you wouldn't want aired today. Maybe some that are still on now. And like I can go back to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Their first season, they have an episode that's blatantly racist. And yet it's still on the air. They still make new episodes. It's the longest running show now.
Real question. How does South Park get a pass?
Because it's satire. And it's labeled itself as satire. And
it isn't The Office satire?
It's a mockumentary.
If you're seeing real characters that aren't real, like there's no humans like this, aren't they doing satire? Isn't that what all comedy kind of is? That are emulating real life, but we know it's not real life?
I think that South Park is full on satire where there's some satirical elements to The Office, but it's portrayed as, these people are just like any office setting that you're in.
Okay. Interesting. The other complaint with Friends, just as an addendum, that you hear a lot is diversity. Although that's an interesting one because Friends was super progressive for its time. They're the first show that has a gay marriage. Like when you meet the first episode, when you meet Ross, his wife has left him for another woman. And they're a part of the story moving forward. Like that was interesting that Friends has been labeled that way. But again, it's in context. At the time, they're talking about things and they have things going on that are super progressive. But I understand that there's other ways they act that now wouldn't be.
Like there are very few people of color at that coffee shop.
Yeah. So Aisha Tyler, who played the girlfriend of the African-American girlfriend of Joey and Ross at certain points of the show, still gets referred to as that black lady from Friends, which should tell you everything you need to know about the diversity. The creators of Friends said they wish they had been more diverse now. But I will say this, and this isn't a blanket defense, but I will say this. It seems weird for us to question the diversity of a show called Friends, where the vast majority of people in this country do not have diverse friend groups. Is that not true? The vast majority of people in this country do not have diverse friend groups. You hang with people that look and sound and live like you. Is that true? That's a rhetorical question. That's proven fact.
I don't know.
You know who's maybe the most diverse? Church folks. Which that's interesting. But even churches are even churches can be pretty cordoned off to the people that look and sound like you. But I'm just saying, most people's friend groups are not that diverse.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, I think it's a weird thing. And I'm talking your close friends. We live in a small town. A lot of people live in small towns where you're just not around a diverse group. So I don't know, just something to think about. You got anything else to add? At the end of the day, I don't know. And I'm fine with what the culture wants to come up with, right? Like at the end of the day, we're pastors and we want to be inclusive and love everybody.
So for me, like the whole Friends thing, like once you know Ross and Rachel are going to have this, will they, won't they? They finally will. And then, oh, okay, that build-up's all over. Now there's just random funny moments and the story's really not that interesting to me. Like it's not one I can rewatch. Where like Scrubs, which I think several people would say there's parts that are highly problematic because Dr. Cox will refer to JD with feminine terms and names constantly. Yeah. I think that it ages well because, again, unlike Friends, it has an educational moment at the end of every episode, like what the moral of the story was. And maybe that's the way you cover over a multitude of sins at the end of each of a comedy series is if you have these. Well, what did we get from this episode?
What did we learn today?
I think even on My Name is Earl, that Earl would have like a summary where it's like, well, this happened and yada, yada.
Yeah, at the end of the day, by the way, you're right. Friends hangs on about 3 seasons too much at least. Because and they get more cartoonish as characters, more cringy because you got to keep writing funny storylines, which we said George Carlin, maybe one of the funniest people who's ever lived, told you how the joke's constructed. You got to stretch something way out of proportion. You keep stretching them, and pretty soon they don't resemble human beings. And that kind of happened with Friends. Like they keep doing more and more ridiculous things. But like, what do you guys think? Listeners, how do you feel about 90s sitcoms? Which, if you're old enough that you were there and alive and you were watching them, do you still watch them? Do they still hold up for you?
One, I wish that I could get my hands on so I could rewatch it, and then I would have had it in my list of whether it holds up or not. 2 Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be worth a rewatch.
Because you have Ryan Reynolds and Natalie Krieger from Monk.
Yeah.
That's not her name in real life, but that's who she played on Monk.
I mean, speaking of problematic, Ryan Reynolds hits big in a movie called Van Wilder. And that, like...
Waiting also. Problematic.
Yeah. Super problematic. What do you think, listeners? Can we watch shows? Can we enjoy these? Can they remake these? Is it just different now? What were your favorite sitcoms? Which ones do you still like to watch? Which ones do you find cringy that you used to like? We'd be interested in hearing from you. Go to our Facebook page or our Twitter account. Let us know. If you haven't followed our Facebook page, you should probably do that. And also join our Pop Culture Pastor community page where we get even deeper into conversations. And then you can share things with us. Deep conversation. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. We are so glad to do this every week, and we'll see you next week. Pop Culture Pastor.